He called her fat after she gave birth to his child, threw her out in the rain with their baby, and replaced her with a mistress. A year later, she walked into his boardroom in heels and silence, now the company's largest shareholder. And with one vote, she took everything back, starting with his power. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The soft click of heels against polished marble echoed through the penthouse, but Aisha's heart beat louder. It was their anniversary. She had slipped on the same fitted emerald dress she wore the night Marcus had proposed, hoping it would spark a memory, a flicker of warmth in his eyes. The satin hugged her figure differently now, fuller hips, a softened belly, but she thought she still looked beautiful. Not perfect, not the woman she once was, but beautiful in a new, more grounded way. The candles on the dining table flickered nervously, and the salmon grew cold under its silver dome. He was late. Again. The elevator chimed. Aisha turned, brushing her palms down her hips to smooth non-existent creases. The moment the door opened, she knew something was wrong. Marcus didn't greet her. No smile. No flowers. He stepped inside, loosened his tie, and tossed his keys onto the marble counter with a metallic clatter. His eyes met hers, and then slid away, cold and empty. Happy anniversary, Aisha offered, her voice delicate, unsure. He looked at her then, and really looked. A slow, cruel smirk tugged at his lips. You wore that dress? She blinked. It's the one from our engagement dinner. You said I looked. I said you looked like a goddess, he cut her off. Back when it actually fit you. The air thickened and Aisha's chest tightened. Marcus. He walked past her, unbuttoning his cufflinks. I work 16 hours a day managing our assets, securing deals, keeping this empire alive, and I come home to this? He turned back to her, waving his hand dismissively in her direction. I just had a baby, Marcus. Your son. He barely sleeps. He scoffed. That was a year ago. You've had more than enough time to get your act together. Instead, you sit around all day eating and whining. Look at you. I do work, Marcus. I run the marketing arm. No one cares about the marketing arm, he snapped. I'm the face of this company. I go to events, dinners, galas. I need a wife who looks the part, not someone who waddles in behind me like a tired housemaid. The words struck her like a slap. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. She tried to steady her voice. You never say anything kind anymore. You barely see our son. And when you do, you act like he's a chore. I've been holding everything together, Marcus. The house, the baby, my role. Don't flatter yourself. He crossed his arms. You've been eating your feelings and calling it survival. I married a queen. Now I'm stuck with whatever this is. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not yet. She stepped toward him, trembling. You said you loved me. You held my hand while I pushed life into this world. You kissed me in that hospital room and promised to take care of us. Does that mean nothing to you now? Marcus moved past her to the bedroom, pulled open his closet, and dragged out a sleek designer suitcase. What are you doing? She asked. Leaving. She stared, disoriented. What do you mean, leaving? I filed for divorce 2 weeks ago. My lawyer will be in touch. His tone was flat, efficient, emotionless. Aisha stumbled backward as if the floor had shifted beneath her. Marcus, we have a child. What about him? What about our family? What about? You should have thought about our family before you turned into a liability, he muttered, throwing his shirts into the suitcase in tight, angry folds. I sacrificed for this family, she whispered, her voice cracking. I gave everything. And I gave you a life most women would kill for, he said, zipping the suitcase closed. You squandered it. He walked past her again, brushing her shoulder with cold indifference. She stood frozen in place, surrounded by the dim flicker of candles, the untouched food, the silence of a home that had once echoed with laughter. Just before he reached the door, he paused. Oh, And I'm keeping the penthouse. The prenup covers it. Her knees nearly buckled. Where am I supposed to go? With our child. He turned his head slightly, not enough to look her in the eye. That's not my problem anymore. Then the door slammed. The echo ricocheted through the high ceilings, down the marble halls, and into her bones. Aisha sank to the floor. Alone. Abandoned. Broken. But not for long. Rain blurred the city lights that night like tears on glass. The penthouse windows, once showcasing breathtaking views, now mirrored the suffocating silence inside. Aisha sat alone on the edge of the plush leather sofa, her son cradled against her chest. His tiny fingers curled in sleep, his rhythmic breathing the only sound in a space that had once been filled with music, laughter, dreams. The hours passed in stillness. She hadn't cried. Not yet. Her mind was too busy reeling, untangling the chaos of the last few hours, reliving every word Marcus had thrown at her like daggers. She looked down at her child. His soft, milk-sweet breath tickled her neck. I have to be strong. For him. The clock struck 2:08 a.m. The elevator dinged. Her body tensed. It was supposed to be her home. But somehow she knew Marcus wasn't done. The doors slid open, and in walked Marcus and another woman. Aisha rose to her feet, instinctively pulling her son close as he stirred against her chest. The woman was tall, angular, draped in a red satin dress that clung to her like plastic wrap. Her smile dripped arrogance. She didn't look at Aisha, she looked through her. Marcus didn't acknowledge the tension. He walked in casually, like he still owned the air she breathed. What the hell is this? Aisha asked, voice sharp but trembling. I live here, Marcus replied, unbothered, tossing his coat onto a chair. And as of now, you don't. She stared at him. You brought her into our home? Into the same space where our child sleeps. Correction, he said coolly, pouring himself a drink. This is my home. You're just occupying it temporarily. And I'm reclaiming my space. The woman let out a low chuckle and perched herself on the bar stool like a queen taking her throne. She's still here? She asked Marcus, in a voice dripping with theatrical pity. Aisha turned to her, rage swelling in her chest. Do you have no decency? Marcus held up a hand. Enough. You can play the victim all you want, Aisha, but it's done. I've moved on. I have nowhere to go tonight, Marcus, she hissed. It's 2 a.m. Our son is asleep. You want me to drag him into the street. You should have thought of that before you let yourself become a burden. The words sliced deeper this time. She blinked, as if trying to wake up from a nightmare. You really don't feel anything, do you? Marcus looked her over like an accountant auditing a spreadsheet. I feel relief. And disgust. And most of all, I feel done. The mistress laughed again, sipping from a wine glass she'd helped herself to. Maybe it's best if you just leave quietly. Something inside Aisha snapped, not into chaos, but into clarity. Cold, sharp clarity. She set her baby's diaper bag on the sofa with trembling hands, placed the boy's blanket over his body, and picked him up gently. His head rested on her shoulder, unaware of the storm raging around him. Marcus opened the door. Rain whipped inside. I'll be contacting my lawyer, she said, her voice low but deadly calm. And when I come for everything I'm owed, don't say I didn't warn you. Marcus smirked. You'll get the scraps. The prenup's solid. Her eyes narrowed. I built this company with you, she said. I sat in on meetings, I helped design the first branding deck, I introduced you to your first investor. Don't ever think I came empty-handed. Save the drama, he sneered. You don't have the fight in you. She stepped into the rain without another word. Her bare arms soaked instantly, her shoes squelching with each step. But Aisha didn't look back. The elevator door closed behind her, the hum of its descent drowning out Marcus's world forever. She didn't have money. She didn't have a place to sleep. She had no plan. But she had fire. And unknown to Marcus, she also still had her shares. Silent. Legal. Waiting like a sword behind her back. Tonight, he took away her roof. But someday soon, she would take away his crown. The apartment was small. 2 rooms and a hallway barely wide enough for a stroller. The walls were chipped, the carpet frayed, and the plumbing sang its own tune at night. But for Aisha, it was a sanctuary. The first night she laid her son down in the creaky crib beside her borrowed mattress. She stared at the ceiling for hours. She didn't cry. Not because the pain had left, but because crying had started to feel too expensive. Her energy belonged elsewhere now, on survival. The next morning, she rose before the sun, her muscles stiff and her eyes raw. The baby stirred as the world outside yawned awake with delivery trucks, barking dogs, and neighbors arguing 2 floors below. She moved like a ghost through the kitchen, making coffee with trembling hands, her body still aching from emotional whiplash. But as she sipped it slowly, something settled in her chest. Resolve. The city didn't care that she had been abandoned. The world didn't pause for a broken heart. And Marcus? He wouldn't care that his son slept beside a space heater, or that his former wife spent nights calculating diaper expenses. That was fine. She didn't need his care anymore. She needed strategy. Day 1. She wrote down everything she had. A 13.8% stake in MKH Capital through a silent trust. A law degree she had never used, having left the bar behind when Marcus asked her to focus on the family. A few $1,000s in a separate savings account Marcus had either forgotten about or ignored. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Week 2. She started walking. First for her son, stroller laps around the block to lull him to sleep, then for herself. Her body groaned in protest at first. Knees cracking, ankles sore. But she kept walking. Every morning, every night, rain, wind, or sun. She walked until walking felt like breathing. Her reflection in the hallway mirror began to change. Not the size of her waist, not yet, but the fire in her eyes. The tightness in her jaw. The way she held her shoulders like a soldier awaiting orders. She was at war now. Quietly. Patiently. Month 1. She dusted off her resume, took freelance legal drafting gigs from a laptop someone donated through a local shelter program. She worked late into the night, her son asleep beside her on a second-hand mattress. She read company reports for MKH Capital like scripture, circling every discrepancy in red, filing notes into folders, Marcus's mistakes, a file that grew thicker by the week. She memorized the names of the board. She followed the company's investors, took notes on their values, tracked rumors of internal unrest. She wasn't just healing. She was preparing. Month 4. The weight started to come off. Not because she hated her body, but because she was finally feeding herself, with real food, real purpose. Her days were structured. A morning workout with a stroller jog in the park, freelance legal work from noon to dusk, baby care on a rotation that required military efficiency. She joined a co-op gym where single moms shared shifts and babysat for one another. There, she met Janelle, a former financial analyst turned fitness coach, who took one look at Aisha and said, "You're not just getting in shape. You're sharpening a blade." By month 4, Aisha no longer looked like the woman Marcus had mocked. Her posture had changed. Her clothes fit differently. But more than that, her presence had shifted. People began to notice. Month 7. She reached out to a family friend, Mr. Delgado, a quiet investor and former board member of MKH who had left 2 years prior. He met her at a downtown cafe, unsure of what to expect. When she walked in tailored slacks and a crisp blazer, holding her financial folders under one arm, he blinked. "Aisha, I need to talk," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. An hour later, he leaned back slowly. "If what you're saying is true, Marcus is exposing the company to serious liability. Misuse of expense accounts? Covering travel for a personal relationship? This could sink him." Aisha smiled faintly. "Good. Help me dig." And he did. Month 10. Through Delgado's contacts, she began buying shares. Carefully. Strategically. Shell accounts. Silent partners. No trail Marcus would recognize. The old board members welcomed her with raised eyebrows and quiet nods. MKH Capital was not what it used to be. Morale was crumbling. Investors were nervous. And Marcus? He was oblivious, still posting luxury lunches on social media, still surrounded by yes-men too scared to challenge him, still bloated with pride. He had no idea the woman he discarded was now sitting quietly behind the curtain, inching closer to a majority share. Month 12. On the anniversary of the night she left the penthouse, Aisha stood in front of a mirror and didn't recognize herself. Not because she was smaller, though she was. Not because her clothes hung cleaner, though they did. But because her eyes had grown still. No more panic. No more begging for love. Just precision. Focus. She turned away from the mirror, picked up her phone, and made a call. "Schedule the board meeting," she told Delgado. "It's time." The boardroom of MKH Capital was a cold, modern glass box perched on the 52nd floor of the company's headquarters, high above the smog and noise of the city. It was a temple of power and pretense, all chrome edges, black marble flooring, and recessed lighting that cast everything in clinical blue tones. At precisely 9 a.m., the board meeting began. Marcus arrived first, tailored to perfection in a charcoal gray suit that cost more than most people's rent. His presence was arrogant as always, phone in hand, Bluetooth earpiece flashing, his cologne cutting through the air like authority. He swept into the room without greeting anyone, tossed his leather briefcase on the table, and took the head seat, his seat. The other members trickled in one by one. Some greeted him with polite nods, others avoided eye contact. Whispers hummed beneath the surface, inaudible but heavy. Tension spiderwebbed across the long mahogany table. To Marcus, it was just another quarterly meeting. Another parade of charts, applause, and rubber-stamped approval. As far as he was concerned, MKH was running smoothly. The dip in stock? Temporary. The murmurs of unrest? Jealousy. He sipped his espresso and tapped his pen against a folder marked Annual Review. Chairman Boyd, an elder with an agitated brow, cleared his throat. "Before we begin with reports, there's a matter we must address, an emergency vote requested by multiple shareholders." Marcus lifted an eyebrow, clearly annoyed. "A vote? No one told me about this." Boyd's eyes narrowed. "It was confidential, at the request of someone with authority to call it." Marcus leaned back, smirking. "All right then. What are we voting on?" Silence. Then Boyd spoke clearly. "Removal of the current chief executive officer." The room stilled. Marcus's smirk faltered, just slightly. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Boyd said, voice calm but firm. "We've received substantial concern from major shareholders about company direction, financial transparency, and ethical conflicts." Marcus let out a short laugh. "You're joking. This is a prank, right? Who called this meeting?" The boardroom doors opened. He turned. And there she was. Aisha. She walked in like a whisper before a storm, wrapped in a black power suit that kissed her waist and framed her every movement like art. Her heels tapped rhythmically against the marble, slow, intentional, commanding. She wore no jewelry except a wedding ring on a chain around her neck. Not as a symbol of sentiment, but of survival. Proof of what she had endured and what she had outgrown. Marcus stood abruptly. "What the hell are you doing here?" Aisha met his gaze unfazed. "Good morning, Marcus. Have a seat." He didn't move. Boyd gestured to the empty chair across the table. "She's here as a shareholder." Marcus blinked. "She doesn't have enough stake to be here." "I do now," Aisha replied evenly. She opened a folder and slid forward a document with her signature at the bottom. One by one, the other board members began pulling out matching copies. Delgado, seated at the far end, locked eyes with Marcus and nodded once. She now controls 51.6% of the company. The silence was volcanic. Marcus went pale. "That's impossible. You never paid attention to the Class B shares," Aisha said, almost with pity. "You were too busy parading your ego to realize how many people were ready for change." He leaned forward, voice sharp. "You're trying to destroy me." "No," she replied. "You did that all on your own. I'm just turning the lights on so everyone can see it." Boyd cleared his throat again. "We'll proceed to the vote." all in favor of removing Marcus Hale as CEO of MKH Capital. Hands rose. 1, 2, 3. A cascade. Aisha raised hers last. Marcus didn't. Boyd nodded solemnly. The motion passes. Marcus stared around the table, disbelief etched in every twitch of his jaw. You can't do this. Aisha stood. We just did. Security entered quietly, 2 men in dark suits. Marcus's voice rose. This is my company. I built this. You think you can just walk in here with your new dress and your little revenge fantasy and… Stop, Aisha said, raising a hand. Her voice was soft, but it hit like steel. You built it with me. And then you threw us away like we didn't matter. You gambled our legacy on vanity and women who clapped at your money. You forgot what built this company in the first place. Vision, partnership, integrity. You stopped leading and started performing. And now, you're dismissed. Security stepped closer. Marcus backed up, hands raised. You're making a mistake. No, she said. You did. A year ago. At 2 a.m. In the rain. The guards escorted him to the door. He looked back one last time. His face crumpled with disbelief. No longer a titan, just a man. A small, frightened man losing everything. Aisha exhaled slowly. Not from joy. Not from vengeance. But from completion. The boardroom remained still for a long beat. Then someone clapped. Another followed. And another. She didn't smile. Not yet. She simply turned, picked up her folder, and walked to the seat at the head of the table, the one Marcus used to occupy. She sat down, folded her hands, and said, "Let's begin." The moment Aisha sat in the CEO chair, the air shifted. It wasn't just a change of leadership. It was a change of energy, of gravity. The boardroom, moments earlier stiff with corporate tension, seemed to soften. Like the walls themselves were exhaling after years of holding their breath under Marcus Hale's reign. Aisha didn't revel in the applause. She didn't need to. Power, real power, didn't shout. It didn't pose. It didn't demand. It arrived. And she had arrived. Later that morning, in the executive wing that once belonged to Marcus, the staff gathered in hushed circles as Aisha passed by. Some lowered their heads in apology. Others offered soft smiles, shy nods. A few women watched her like a lighthouse emerging from fog, each of them remembering the whispers of what Marcus had done, what he'd said about his wife behind closed doors, how quickly he'd moved on. She walked to the office at the very end of the corridor. His office. Her assistant, a young woman named Tiana who had been reassigned to her that morning, hesitated before unlocking the door. "Are you sure you want this office, ma'am? We can prepare something new." Aisha smiled faintly. "No, this is exactly where I belong." The door opened. It was pristine, over-designed and soulless. Glossy black furniture, chrome edges, abstract art pieces that screamed excess but whispered nothing of warmth. A monument to ego. On the desk, a crystal paperweight still bore Marcus's initials, MH. She picked it up, held it for a beat, then dropped it into the trash. "Have everything in here replaced," she said. "No waste. Donate it all." Tiana nodded, already scribbling on her tablet. "Oh, and find me a contractor. I want walls removed. Windows added. This place has had enough shadows." She took a seat at the desk, not because it was Marcus's, but because it was now hers. Her reflection in the glass tabletop stared back at her, sharp, steady. There was no trace of the woman who'd once wept into cold sheets while her husband packed his suitcase. That woman had burned away in the fire. Now there was only Aisha, the storm that fire left behind. 3 weeks later, the transformation was in motion. The company's culture, once rooted in hierarchy and intimidation, was shifting beneath her feet. She held meetings in open rooms, sat at round tables instead of podiums, and started each session by asking every department head how their people were doing, a question Marcus had never once bothered to utter. She overhauled the HR protocols, instituted wellness stipends, reinstated the maternity and paternity leave Marcus had slashed to save money. She hired consultants to audit environmental practices and promised transparency in every area Marcus had tried to bury. But she wasn't just being generous. She was being strategic, because power meant nothing if it wasn't sustainable, if it wasn't shared. And beneath every press headline hailing her as the CEO Phoenix, every applause-filled board session, she was building something far more important than a legacy. She was building armor. For herself. For other women. For the next Aisha who might one day be told she was too soft, too emotional, too fat, too late, too much. Then the audit results arrived. Aisha sat in her newly redesigned office. Sunlight pouring in through floor-to-ceiling windows, warm wood where cold chrome once stood, reading the final report Delgado's private audit team had compiled. Marcus had not just mismanaged funds. He had abused his position. Private jets logged as client meetings. Luxury gifts to his mistress classified as employee incentives. Over $1.2 million in undocumented expenses over 2 years. She closed the folder slowly. Let the silence breathe. Then she picked up the phone. Release it. The news hit like a lightning bolt. Headlines screamed across business media. Former MKH CEO under financial misconduct investigation. Marcus Hale accused of corporate embezzlement. Shareholder queen cleans house. New leadership, new standards. Marcus's remaining allies fled like rats from a sinking ship. Investors who had stayed quiet during his reign now praised Aisha for her bold reform. The stock surged. Marcus? He went dark. No interviews. No statements. Only a cryptic tweet days later. Not everything is as it seems. It was met with ridicule, memes, and silence from his former supporters. 1 month later, Aisha stood backstage at a global business summit, waiting to speak. She wore a cream pantsuit, elegant and soft yet fierce in its lines. Her son, now walking, had drawn a crooked little star, with crayons on a sticky note that she'd folded and tucked into her blazer pocket. It was her talisman. She stepped onto the stage to a standing ovation. Not for revenge, for resurrection. She spoke with calm clarity about leadership, about resilience, about transformation. And when she closed, she looked out at the sea of faces, paused, and said, "There was a time I thought I needed someone else's permission to shine. That time is over. I'm not here to prove anything. I'm here to build everything." And when she stepped off stage, dozens stood waiting, not with cameras, but with questions. With ideas. With admiration that was earned, not demanded. That night, in her quiet apartment, still modest, still grounded, she tucked her son into bed and whispered, "You're safe now, baby. Mommy's got us." She turned off the light. But in the dark, Aisha smiled. Because tomorrow she would rise again. And this time on her own terms. The apartment was dim, the air stale, heavy with silence and the bitter scent of burnt coffee. Marcus sat hunched over a folding table in a space that barely passed for livable. The once dominant CEO, the man who had once flown private to Monaco for a board retreat, now lived in a cramped one-bedroom sublet in the outer boroughs, a place where the walls were paper-thin and the plumbing groaned like it hated him. He hadn't shaved in days. His once pristine suits now hung in a garment bag in the back of a closet, untouched. There was no one left to impress. He stared at the TV, but it was off. The reflection staring back at him was unrecognizable, unkempt, hollow-eyed, thinner, not with discipline but with collapse. The media hadn't let up. Every day was another headline. Marcus Hale's financial crimes confirmed. Board moves forward with legal proceedings. From CEO to cautionary tale. How Marcus Hale lost it all. Aisha Hale, the woman who dismantled an empire and rebuilt it better. They didn't even use his last name alone anymore. Aisha Hale was the headline. He was the footnote. He barked a bitter laugh at the thought. The same woman he had mocked, reduced, discarded, had turned his entire life inside out. And he had helped her do it by underestimating her. The mistress was the first to leave. She had packed quietly in the middle of the night. No fight. No note. Just a vanished perfume bottle, an empty drawer, and a deactivated credit card, that had once funded her designer handbags and fake sympathy. He woke up to her absence and the familiar sting of being used. Calls to former allies went unanswered. Emails were ignored. Invitations dried up. No more gala events. No more charity boards. His name, once a golden ticket, now carried the scent of scandal. He tried to sell the sports car. It was seized 2 days later for outstanding corporate debts. Marcus scrolled aimlessly on his phone, searching for someone, anyone, who might still pick up. But no one did. He opened his Instagram, still filled with photos of expensive watches, yacht parties, and champagne toasts from months past. A life that felt like a hallucination. He opened her profile. At @AishaHale_official. The first image was of her standing at a podium, the MKH logo glowing behind her. Another showed her smiling next to their son, her son now, outside a modest home. No glitz. No ego. Just joy. There were thousands of comments. She's everything he never was. Real leadership. Real strength. Marcus who? He slammed the phone face down, breathing hard. Shame had a sound. It echoed in rooms like this. Rooms too small for a man whose identity had been built entirely on control. He had no purpose here. No status. Just 4 walls, a ruined name, and the realization that the power he once wielded so carelessly had turned to ash in his hands. Later that night, the rain returned. How fitting. He stepped out onto the narrow, rusted balcony, letting the drizzle soak through his shirt. He stared at the city skyline in the distance, so far away it might as well have been another universe. He remembered the way Aisha used to look out over that same skyline, 20 stories above the world, back when she still believed he loved her. He remembered her standing there the night he threw her out, clutching their child, her dignity shredded but her spine still unbroken. Back then, he'd thought he was doing her a favor by letting her go. But now, he could see it clearly. She had let herself go, yes. But not into failure. Into freedom. He went back inside and sank into the sofa, his thoughts swirling. What had he become? He wasn't a leader. He wasn't even a man anymore. Just a bitter shell, too proud to apologize, too broken not to want to. But a thought crawled up from the bottom of his soul like a whisper in the dark. Go to her. The idea filled him with equal parts dread and longing. Would she even speak to him? Would she spit in his face? Or worse, would she look through him the way he once looked through her? He grabbed his coat. He didn't know what he would say. He didn't know what he even hoped for. But he had nothing else. And part of him, the part still faintly human, needed to see if the woman he had destroyed could somehow forgive the ghost of the man who'd done it. It was just after 7 p.m. when Aisha pulled into the driveway of her modest home. The sun was dipping behind the trees, casting long golden shadows across the porch. Her son's laughter echoed faintly from inside, where the nanny, Miss Denise, was helping him with finger paints and bath time. Aisha stepped out of the car, heels clicking against the concrete. She was tired, but satisfied, the kind of tired that came from building something real. Something lasting. She closed the car door and paused. A figure stood at the end of the driveway. Still. Waiting. The wind carried the scent of rain and regret. She knew before he spoke. Aisha. She turned slowly. Marcus stood there, dressed in a wrinkled dress shirt and jeans that didn't quite fit right. No Rolex. No polished smile. Just a man stripped of image and illusion, weighed down by something heavier than failure, remorse. Aisha tilted her head slightly, eyes cool, unreadable. You must have taken a wrong turn. Marcus swallowed hard. I know I don't deserve to be here. But I had to come. She crossed her arms. You don't have to do anything anymore. That ended the night you threw us into the street. He flinched. I was wrong. Wrong, she echoed, voice quiet but cutting. You didn't forget an anniversary, Marcus. You dismantled our lives. You humiliated me. You weaponized love. I know, he said quickly, stepping closer. I know I was cruel. Arrogant. I thought success meant I could do whatever I wanted, and that you'd always be there. I didn't see what I had. I didn't see you. Aisha didn't move. Didn't blink. Her silence was heavier than a scream. He kept going, eyes wet. I see you now. I watch your interviews. I see what you've built. And I see what I destroyed. I lost everything. My reputation, my friends, the money, but what I miss most, what I regret most. His voice cracked. Is you. The porch light flicked on. Aisha didn't react. Her expression didn't change. She walked forward slowly until there were only a few feet between them. Do you remember, she said, voice calm, what you told me the night you packed your suitcase? Marcus looked down, ashamed. Yes. She stepped even closer. You said I was too fat to be seen with. That our child would be embarrassed to have a mother like me. You said you were done pretending to be happy. That you needed someone who looked the part. She let the words sit in the air like smoke. I remember everything, Marcus. I remember every syllable. Not because I'm bitter, but because I carried them, on my back, on my hips, in my silence. I carried them while I raised your child alone. While I worked nights. While I rebuilt the company you tried to ruin. Tears welled in his eyes. I didn't know how strong you were. She shook her head. No, you didn't care. He stepped forward impulsively, reaching for her hand. But I do now. I care. I see you, Aisha. I want to make things right, even if it takes forever. Please, let me prove that I've changed. She didn't flinch. Didn't even look at his hand. Instead, she said very softly, forgiveness is earned long before the apology. His hand fell. She stared at him for a long moment, then looked past him. Toward the street, toward the dark sky, toward the space that used to belong to a version of herself she no longer carried. When you left, she said, I begged myself to believe you'd realize your mistake. I dreamt of this moment. You broken. Me strong. But now that it's here. She took a breath. I feel nothing. Marcus blinked. Nothing. No hatred. No revenge. Just distance. A kind of peace that doesn't include you. He swayed slightly, as if her words had wind behind them. I'm not angry, Marcus, she said. I'm done. She turned and began walking up the porch steps. Wait, he called, his voice hollow now. Desperate. Is there really no way back? She looked back once, just once. And what he saw in her eyes was something that didn't exist the last time he saw her. Freedom. No, she said simply. Then she stepped inside, closing the door behind her with a soft click that sounded louder than any slam. Behind her, the house glowed with life. Her son ran toward her, tiny paint-covered fingers reaching out. She knelt down and scooped him up, burying her face in his neck. His giggle filled the space like music. Outside, Marcus stood alone in the dark, the cold pressing against his skin. No headlines now. No boardroom. No wife. Just the echo of the man he used to be. And the silence of the woman who had finally, completely, let him go. It was raining again, but this time Aisha didn't flinch. She stood at the window of her office, high above the city, watching droplets race down the glass like silent messengers of time. The view stretched for miles, the skyline bold and jagged, the streets below pulsing with life. But Aisha wasn't looking at the buildings or the traffic. She was looking at how far she had come. Behind her, the office was alive with quiet hums. A potted plant she watered herself, soft jazz from the turntable in the corner, the glow of family photos on her desk. One in particular of her and her son laughing on a picnic blanket. His curls wild, her smile unguarded. That photo had gone viral once, though she hadn't meant for it to. People called it the face of a new generation of leadership. She just called it home. Earlier that morning, she spoke at a conference. The same one Marcus used to dominate with theatrics and charm. Now the crowd leaned forward not in awe of flash, but in reverence for substance. She talked about equity, about the value of empathy and leadership, about motherhood not as a setback, but a superpower. When someone asked, "What kept you going after everything?" she paused. Then replied, "Knowing that my story could become someone else's permission." Later that afternoon, she walked the halls of MKH Capital, not as a feared executive, but as a respected one. Employees smiled at her, stopped her, shared ideas freely. No more stiff backs or hushed gossip. She remembered how Marcus used to stride these same halls. Phone in hand, eyes ahead, ignoring the very people who built the company brick by brick. She stopped by the marketing department, her first love, and listened in on a brainstorming session. She didn't interrupt, just observed, a proud hum warming her chest as she watched a young intern sketch out a pitch with trembling enthusiasm. When the intern noticed her and began to stammer, Aisha just smiled and said, "You're doing great. Keep going." It meant everything. The office lights dimmed as the day came to a close. Aisha stayed behind, finishing a letter for a foundation she had just launched. The Hale Initiative, named not after Marcus, but after herself and her son. A fund to support single mothers, displaced women, and women in leadership training. It was her answer to the pain. Not revenge. Redirection. Not erasing what happened, but repurposing it. As she locked her office, she took the elevator down to the underground parking garage. The metal doors opened silently, and she stepped inside, pressing the button with a practiced ease. And then something made her pause. She reached into her purse and pulled out the chain she still carried. The old wedding ring. She stared at it for a long moment, the cool metal nestled in her palm. Once it symbolized forever. Then it symbolized betrayal. Now, it was just an object. No rage. No memory that could hurt her anymore. Just a loop of gold that she had outgrown. She walked to the edge of the platform, where a donation box sat for recycled tech and metals, a corporate social initiative she'd implemented months ago. She dropped the ring in. It hit the bottom with a faint metallic clink. She smiled. Release. Her son met her at the door with a paper crown on his head and glitter on his cheeks. "I'm a king, Mommy," he shouted proudly, arms raised high. Aisha dropped her bag and scooped him up, spinning him in a dizzy circle. "No, sweetheart," she said between laughs. "You're more than that. You're the son of a queen." He giggled, then paused. "What's a queen?" She kissed his cheek. "Someone who builds something no one can take away." He seemed to understand. She tucked him in that night with a soft lullaby, her voice weaving through the room like a prayer. Then she sat beside him as he drifted to sleep, her fingers brushing through his curls. In the quiet, she whispered, "You will never have to question what love looks like." Late at night, she stepped onto the back porch with a cup of tea. The sky was velvet dark, stars scattered above like silver scars. She didn't think of Marcus anymore. Not with anger. Not even with pity. He had become what most men who confuse power with love eventually become. Alone. She thought instead of the women who had reached out. The anonymous letters. The speaking requests. The messages from strangers who saw her not as a headline, but as a lifeline. And she knew. This wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of a reign she hadn't asked for, but had earned. With fire, with grace, with the kind of silence that echoes louder than rage. A queen, yes, but not the kind who ruled with fear. She ruled with proof. Proof that women rise. That mothers endure. That betrayal doesn't bury, but builds. That legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you lift forward. And in the silence of the night, with the stars reflecting in her tea, Aisha whispered two final words. Not for Marcus. Not for the world. But for herself. I won. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.